How you doing, everybody? Vasu Vadaparty here with the VPartySports podcast. We're sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. We do a live broadcast every Sunday. Mention the podcast, the VPartySports podcast, to the staff of the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose, and get 10% off your entire bill. That includes alcohol. Every Sunday during NFL Sunday Ticket. Again, we're there live from 9:30 to 10:30. The sound will be on for the first half of the show. Second half will be online on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. By the way, I want to thank everybody, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, for all the support. We're getting a lot of views. We're getting a lot of hits on the show. Hopefully you're taking my best bet segment, the world famous, never duplicated, unprecedented best bet segment. We'll have that later. This is a college football preview. We're 2 weeks away from the end of the college football regular season. The following Sunday, Thanksgiving Sunday, will be the announcement of the BCS, the top 25 of the BCS. Of course, everybody's interested in the top 6, as they are the BCS Championship Series, and of course, the top 4 for the BCS semifinals and the BCS championship game. All right, let's get started here. We'll hit the NFL on Sunday. We'll have NBA. We'll have NCAA basketball. We'll have some NHL as well, too. And don't forget, we got free agency and baseball to go with, too. But right now, this is a college football preview, and I'll give you our best bets for college football Saturday as well. We got some final scores today, and we'll hit those as we get to the conferences. But I want to give you the final scores from Thursday. I didn't get a chance to talk about it very much. Number 21, Tulane, and we'll get to the American Conference. 59-24, Tulane over SMU. 3.5-point favorite, went over the total of 65.5. Tulane came into the week at number 21 in the American Conference. Tonight, or last night, I should say, San Diego State over New Mexico, 34-10, a 14.5-point favorite. The total, I believe, just went over. It's 42.5, and the game ended up at 44. Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, 36, and it ended up at 44. So San Diego State minus 14.5. The over goes over. San Diego State put a lot of offense on the board. And then the other game tonight, really a nothing game in Conference USA, the South Florida Bulls versus Tulsa, 48-42. Tulsa over South Florida. We know some of you bet on that game. Tulsa did not cover the 14. Obviously, at 48-42, I don't care what the total was posted at. It went over at 90. I don't have the exact number, but as I see it, 57.5 the total. So 90-point game. USF at 1-10, but did cover the point spread at 14. So those are your 3 finals for Friday. Now we get to today, top 25 games, and we'll go through them. We'll go through them in order by ranking, so that you'll have an idea. Then we'll hit all the conferences, and we'll hit all the standings for machinations in terms of how these will work out and how BCS will look at it. But also, there's conference championships in 2 weekends. Not next weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. Those are rivalry weekends for a lot of people. The conference championship weekend, the following Friday, December 2nd, and then all the rest of the conference championship games on Saturday the 3rd, and then December 4th will be the announcement of the BCS. So not the following Sunday, the following Sunday. I think I got my dates right. December 4th is the Sunday that we're looking at. December 5th. Let's see if I get this right. December 4th is the Sunday I'm looking at for all the BCS announcements after all the conference championships. We already have a couple of conference championships set up, even though we're 2 weeks away. And that is in the SEC. LSU from the west of the SEC will play Georgia. Georgia's already clinched the East. And then the ACC, Clemson, who rolled this season, except for the one loss against Notre Dame, went undefeated in their half of the in their division of the ACC. They'll take on North Carolina, both at 9-1. North Carolina's only loss coming early in the year. In fact, I think that was a conference game. So let's make sure I got this right here. It was. They lost to Notre Dame. So both teams have lost to Notre Dame, and therefore North Carolina and Clemson will be in. So that's one thing they have in common going into it. All right. As far as tomorrow goes, let's hit tomorrow's games. We know you want the best bet segment at the end, so we'll do this as fast as possible. Again, don't forget to come down to the Brit every day for happy hour. Don't forget college football, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball when it's on, and then, of course, the NHL as well, too. Here we go. Right to the NCAA top 25 with the lines included. Number 1, Georgia. We said they're already in the SEC championship. They'll probably be number 1 by the time they get there. 23-point favorite at Kentucky, 48.5 Georgia. That defense is unbelievable, allowing about 11 points a game. Kentucky's had their struggles. Middle of the year, Levis was the top quarterback coming into the year as the top quarterback to be drafted. They've had a rough start middle of the year. They had a tough loss at Arkansas early in the year. Their total 48.5. Georgia's defense doesn't give up a lot, but Kentucky may have a tough time scoring. So that'll be interesting to see if that game will go over. Number 2, Ohio State. They'll be at Maryland. Let's see where we're at here. They'll be at Maryland. 27.5-point favorite at Maryland. 63.5 the total. Ohio State undefeated. Maryland's had a little bit of a rough go of it here, but I believe that Maryland can play with them. Tagovailoa's younger brother, Tua Tagovailoa, is there for the Maryland Terrapins. They play well at home. 27, maybe a lot. Ohio State needs this game to stay in concert with Michigan, who at number 3 will host Illinois. Illinois was in the top 25, the 17.5-point favorite for Illinois, the total of 41.5. So they think Illinois may not score, but Michigan has put up a lot of points. Blake Corum, 7 straight games with 100 yards and a touchdown in those games. The University of Michigan on a roll, number 3. They think they're better than Ohio State. Ohio State thinks they're better. They'll decide next Saturday, Thanksgiving Saturday, at the Horseshoe. We'll have full previews of that. We'll have all the rivalry weekends coming up next week. But as far as this weekend goes, it's ranked right now: Georgia at Kentucky, Ohio State at Maryland, Michigan hosts Illinois, TCU. Here's the thing about TCU: 2.5-point favorite at Baylor. Why are they favored? A lot of people don't know about the Horned Frogs. They're good. They're the only team in the top 25 to beat 4 top 25 teams. Georgia didn't do it. Ohio State didn't do it. Maryland didn't do it. Michigan didn't do it. USC didn't do it. UCLA, the only team that did it, TCU at number 4. 2.5-point favorite, 57 the total at Baylor. Baylor's played well at home, but they're not going to see anything like this. If TCU's defense can hold up, they'll be able to shut down that Baylor offense. And Max Duggan has been really good the second half of the year. He wasn't even coming in to be the starter this year, but he's turned it around. They're undefeated. Sonny Dykes, the quarterback whisperer, has turned his season around. Max Duggan, the senior, leading TCU into Baylor. They want to hold that number 4 spot going into the Big 12 final weekend and then possibly a championship game in 2 weeks. Number 5, Tennessee. We know they lost to Georgia. They got hammered by Georgia. I'm not sure Tennessee is better than TCU or worse than TCU. It's kind of a toss-up, but Tennessee right now looking into the top 4 at number 5. 22-point favorite at South Carolina. We know South Carolina struggles offensively all year. Spencer Rattler transferring from Oklahoma just didn't transfer the way that they wanted him to. 66 the point total. We know Tennessee can put up a lot of points, but they've given up a lot of points. And the only way that they can get into the top 4 is if one of the top 4 struggles, and most likely TCU on the road at Baylor. Don't think Georgia's going to have a problem. Don't think Ohio State's going to have a problem. Don't think Michigan's going to have a problem as far as winning. Now, point spreads, that might be a different story here. So we'll analyze those as we get to it. But Tennessee, 22-point favorite at South Carolina, 66 the total. Now, here's where we get to Cupcake City. LSU, after the tough win at Arkansas, they've got UAB, 15-point favorite. Alabama Birmingham has put up points this year. They're in Conference USA, 51 the total. LSU's offense behind Daniels now. They've played well. They beat Alabama 2 weeks ago. They've had big wins on their resume. Brian Kelly in year 1 at Notre Dame has led them to a number 6 ranking after starting off in a bad way early in the year. But you're able to play yourself up into this position because you have the rest of the season to do that. And that's one thing that Ohio State and Michigan don't have, is because the loser automatically falls out of the top 4 or stays in the top 4 depending on the Big Ten conference game and all the other conferences that go with it. But it's just a matter of how it plays out for the committee. There's no rhyme or reason on how the committee votes. There's no metrics to go by other than what they see and some of the common opponents that they played. LSU 15 versus UAB. Now, number 7, USC, a 2-point favorite at UCLA. The rivalry of them all in the Pac-12. I have a partiality to the Pac-12, as you know. 76.5 the total. Are you kidding me? You're going to play defense in this game? Caleb Williams has been outstanding. 1 loss to Utah. If they didn't lose to Utah on that 2-point conversion, they might be in the top 4 right now fighting it out for a BCS spot. UCLA, after their upset loss to Arizona last week now, with 2 losses, probably are not going to move up as high as they can. 76.5 the total. UCLA at number 16 right now. All right, rounding out the top 10, Alabama versus Austin Peay. This is ahead of their Iron Bowl game against Auburn next week. Auburn's down. This is the way Alabama and Auburn do it. They play cupcakes going into the Iron Bowl. We know how big the Iron Bowl is. We saw the 106-yard return a number of years ago. That upset Alabama, took them out of BCS chances in that year. I want to say 2017 was the year that happened with the Vern Lundquist call of a prayer answered on the 106-yard kick for a field goal, run back for a touchdown, and Auburn get the victory and took Alabama out of the BCS championship. Number 9, Clemson, the best of the ACC right now. We told you they're already in with North Carolina. 19-point favorite, 48 the total there. Miami's had a rough year. Mario Cristobal, first year at Miami, coming from Oregon. He wanted to be closer to home, closer to his family. He played at Miami under Dennis Erickson. Not a good start for Mario Cristobal. There's a lot of talk that he may not even last 1 year. 48 the total, 19 on the point spread for Clemson. Very good defense for Clemson. 19 maybe a lot. It's still an ACC game. See when we get to the best bet segment, but make sure you take a look at that. It's hard to lay these heavy favorites because I've done it all year. We've given you best bets with favorites in the early games all the way through the day. And sure enough, backdoor touchdowns, not playing well to start out. Clemson had the tough game against Syracuse early in the year. They were able to win and stay undefeated in conference. They only won by 3 points. They were a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. So 19 points seems like a lot, but Miami's offense has not done squat this year. And you can tell by the record and some of their losses that they've had. All right, the big one in the Pac-12, along with UCLA, USC, number 10, Utah, a 2-point favorite. I've seen it at 2.5 at Oregon. Bo Nix has come in from Auburn on the transfer scale. He's come in and led Oregon. The opening weekend loss to, again, they're a team that were able to play themselves back up into the number 12 spot before losing to Washington. Actually, there were 6, and then they got upset at home by Washington as a 2-touchdown favorite. Washington beat them last weekend. 60.5 the total here. Utah can run the ball. Oregon hasn't stopped a lot of rushing teams this year. The one loss to Georgia, and then last week to Washington. Michael Penix Jr. just picked that defense apart. Can Utah do that as well? They'll do it with more of a running game. Utah blew out Stanford last week. They were a 24-point favorite at home for Stanford, and they ended up winning 42-7. So a good matchup in the Pac-12. And remember, there are no divisions in the Pac-12, so the second-place team will end up playing the first-place team. And right now, it's a logjam between USC and Utah and Oregon. UCLA still has an outside shot, but I don't think that they're going to get there. In fact, they won't get there because one of these two teams will still have one loss. Number 11, Penn State, 18.5 versus Rutgers at Rutgers. They had themselves a chance in the Big Ten West Division to be able to get into the Big Ten championship. They still do, but whoever gets in there is going to end up playing Ohio State or Michigan anyway, and it's going to be fait accompli for that conference. But what an upset that would be if somebody knocked off Ohio State and Michigan. Rutgers, very good defensive team, challenged offensively, 18.5-point underdogs at home. Again, a heavy favorite on the road. This isn't the NFL, and teams are playing for their rankings right now, especially the BCS rankings. Number 13, UNC, we already said they're in the ACC championship. 3-touchdown favorite, 21 on the nose versus Georgia Tech, 63 the total. Georgia Tech offensively challenged. Defensively, they stopped the run. But this UNC team has not played great defense at all, but they can put up points. They're averaging about 46 points a game. Mac Brown has that offense going. Their quarterback, May, has been terrific. I mean, just terrific. The ACC a little down. Clemson, North Carolina, the class of the conference this year, and thus they're going to end up in the ACC championship game in 2 weeks on that Saturday. Number 14, Mississippi. Lane Kiffin got off to a great start. 2.5-point favorite at Arkansas. Now they have 2 losses, and they're not going to be in any contention for BCS. They're 8-2. Arkansas 5-5. 2.5-point favorite on the road. Arkansas very tough at home. We've seen how they played at home. They put the test to LSU last week with a backup quarterback. 65 the total. Jefferson got benched 2 weeks ago, and now their defense handled LSU very cleanly last week. In fact, almost had a chance to win. 65 the total in that game. Can Mississippi put up enough points? Can Arkansas's defense shut them down? Can Arkansas put up enough points? It was only a 13-10 game last week against LSU. 15 Kansas State, 7.5 at West Virginia, 54.5. TCU leading the way right now. They're going to be one of the two teams in that Big 12 championship. TCU needs that win against Baylor, we said, to hold their number 4 position. But the second team right now is a logjam, with K-State being right up there. When we get to the conferences, we'll explain all the standings. Number 15, K-State, 7.5 at West Virginia, 54.5 the total. West Virginia's offense been really, really good. K-State, the transfer, Adrian Martinez from Nebraska. He's been really good. Deuce Vaughn, their running back. They've had some blowout wins. Oklahoma State comes to mind, 48-0 win there. All right, moving on to the top 25. Washington, a 30.5-point favorite versus Colorado, another Pac-12 team. How about 4 Pac-12 teams this year? Even though they don't play defense, offensively, they're all gifted. Colorado, Arizona State, the only 2 teams that haven't played very well to begin with. 30.5-point favorite for Washington. Would you lay 30 points? Every week I keep seeing 30 against Colorado, and yet everybody's covering. USC, Washington, or not Washington, but Utah, and then Oregon, and now Washington with a chance to cover as well, too. Number 18, Notre Dame, 20.5 versus Boston College at home. Notre Dame, they have lost 2 games this year. They beat Clemson early in the year. They've lost 3 games. They lost to Cal. Let me go through this here real quick because I'm trying to remember the 3 losses for Notre Dame now. It is, I think the Cal game was the first one in the year. They lost to Marshall early in the year as well, too. They lost to Ohio State. They lost to Marshall. Came back and beat Cal. Then North Carolina, they beat Clemson. So they beat both the ACC teams, as we said. They lost to Stanford at home. So they played both the Bay Area teams, lost to Stanford, and there's your 3 wins right there. 0-2 to start, 3 losses, and then Stanford got them on October 15th. So they're going to go up against Boston College, very offensively challenged. They're running the ball well, though. They went to Syracuse on the road. They beat Clemson at home when Clemson's defense was touted as a top 5 defense, and they ran the ball all over them. I can't see Boston College stopping them. In fact, ESPN has Notre Dame 93.1% to win. Covering might be a little different. I think it's 68 according to ESPN, but 20.5, the line 43, and that says a lot about Boston College's offense. They can't put any points up. So I got to think that Notre Dame's going to cover 20.5 this weekend. Number 19, Florida State, 24-point favorite over Louisiana Lafayette. They've got their final game against the ACC finale next week. They've moved up in the rankings. Number 19, Florida State, 52 the total. Lafayette can put some points up. Florida State's been trending upward, as they say, out here in Silicon Valley. Trending upward is Florida State to number 19 ranking. They were out of the rankings 2 weeks ago, but they played themselves in it. Central Florida, the Golden Knights at number 20, a 16-point favorite over Navy, 53 the total. Here's the scenario for UCF. They win, they clinch the regular season title. They've got wins over Cincinnati and Tulane. Tulane won the other night. We'll get to that in a second. I just gave that to you, 59-25 over SMU. Tulane at number 21, but they've got wins over both those teams. The round robin scenarios, if they all end up tied with 1 loss, will all be in favor of UCF. Cincinnati and Tulane will play the following weekend. We'll get to Cincinnati in a minute. They've got Temple. They're at number 25. The first team in the top 25 that's an underdog this week, Bedlam in Oklahoma. Big rivalry. Got friends in Oklahoma and Texas that look forward to this game every year. Oklahoma, 7-point favorite over number 22, Oklahoma State, 67 the total. Offense galore in this game. Oklahoma State hasn't stopped anybody all year. Middle of the year, they went through that stretch. They were number 8, remember, in the country when the BCS standings first came out. They got up as high as number 8. 3 losses in a row. They're down to number 22. They got a win last week. But this is a rivalry game. Oklahoma, 7-point favorite. They've had their share of losses as well, too. 67 the total. Look for some points here. I don't think anybody can stop anybody in this game. It's a primetime game, so don't know how the weather will be. 6:30 Central Time down there in Norman, Oklahoma. Number 23, Oregon State. OSU, Oregon State. 7.5-point favorite at Arizona State. Oregon State behind Jonathan Smith had a great year. They're no match for USC or Oregon or Utah, but Oregon State right in the mix there. Still has an outside shot at the second-place spot in the Pac-12 to maybe represent the Pac-12 in the championship game as one of the two teams. Arizona State, you know about all their turmoil. Herm Edwards and his staff got fired, brought in interim coaches. They played better. 54 the total. You can see some offenses this game. This is a Pac-12 game. 54 seems low in that game. The other top 25 team that's an underdog, North Carolina State is a 4-point underdog to Louisville. ACC matchup here, 44.5. Louisville a tough time with Clemson last week. North Carolina State in this matchup, 7-3 last week. They had a tough game. They came out ahead of actually they came back on the short end of Boston College. They came out ahead of Wake Forest 2 weeks ago, and they came out just barely ahead of Virginia Tech on a Thursday night. But they closed last week out on a losing situation to Boston College, 21-20 in that game. North Carolina State was about a 2-touchdown favorite, if I remember. 18-point favorite, 41 the total. But Boston College put enough points. Can they do it against Notre Dame? I don't think so. Notre Dame, a different animal. North Carolina State, very, very offensively challenged right now, having gone to their backup quarterback after Leary went out all year. And then finally, the top 25 roundabout, Cincinnati, 17-point favorite at Temple. Cincinnati's big game will be against Tulane, hoping for UCF to lose. They've already lost to UCF this year in the American Conference. So that rounds out the top 25 of what's happening this weekend. BCS ramifications all over the place in terms of the top 10, in terms of the top 4. We got Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU, the top 4, Tennessee, and LSU at 5 and 6, and then USC in 7th in the number 7 spot. A lot of things have to happen for anywhere below 6 to get into the top 4. All right, when we come back, we'll break down the conferences because, as you know, in the wagering world, doesn't matter who you wager on, doesn't matter who your team is, they all pay the same. 110 to win 100 in some cases. You lay a little bit more on some of the favorites in these blowout games. But we'll break it down by conference. We'll give you the standings, and we'll go into each conference games that have some meaning in terms of line value or in terms of what it means for the standings. Vasi Party here on the V-Party Sportscast on this Saturday morning. Getting ready for a college football Saturday. 2 more weekends left before the final Thanksgiving weekend, before conference championship, and then the BCS rankings 2 Saturdays from now. Back with you in 1 minute with the V-Party Sports Podcast. Welcome back to the V-Party Sports Podcast, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio, downtown San Jose. Check them out every day for happy hour specials, NBA, NHL, NCAA basketball, all in the swing of things right now. And, of course, on Sundays, we're there for a live broadcast every Sunday, 9:30 Pacific time. If you're in the area, come down, check us out, say hi, mention you heard the podcast. You'll get 10% off your entire bill, including alcohol, for NFL Sunday ticket. We'll be there for the next 2 Sundays. Then we're working out the following Sundays after that as we get into the Christmas holiday. But a lot to talk about in the NFL. We'll break that down as well, too. We might have a guest on Sunday to help with the continuation of Week 11. A lot of NBA to talk about. Good games on Friday night in the NBA. College basketball, all the college tournaments going on right now. Top 25 teams playing against each other. Michigan State, Villanova, one of those games last night. But this is the NCAA football preview for this Saturday. Coming up. One more weekend left before Thanksgiving weekend, and then conference championships in 2 weeks, when that following Sunday, the BCS rankings, the final rankings, will come out. I'm your host, Vasi Party, for the V-Party Sports Podcast. Thank you to everybody on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube for all the support. Appreciate all the comments, all the likes, all the views. Pass it on to everybody. Let me know how we're doing. If you like the information we're giving you, you should follow the information right now. We're doing pretty well. We're hitting about 62% in college. We're hitting nearly 70% in the NFL as far as best bets goes. The world famous, unprecedented, never duplicated best bet segment coming up at the end of the show. All right, let's hit the standings a little bit as we get to some of the other games outside of the top 25. Wake Forest, a 10-point favorite versus Syracuse, 58 the total. Syracuse and Wake Forest both got off to great starts. Wake Forest got off to a 4-0 start. Syracuse off to a 3-0 start. They had some close games that they played, including the big one against Purdue. You look at it, we've already told you it's Clemson and North Carolina in the ACC, so not a lot in terms of standings to go for it. And Pitt, a 7-point favorite over Duke in other ACC action. Duke at 7-3, Pitt at 6-4. Standings wise, it's going to be interesting. Pitt at 3-3, and Duke at 4-2. So the winner takes over second place in the Coastal Division of the ACC. All right, the American Conference. We already told you about the big games in the top 25. UCF has got Navy. That's an early game, by the way, for those of you. It's going to start in about an hour, 11 o'clock Eastern against Navy. 16-point favorite for UCF, a win, and they clinched the regular season division record. But as far as standings go, ECU, East Carolina, 6-point favorite, 67.5. Tulsa, they got the win tonight over South Florida. They were 14-point favorite. It was a 48-42 game over South Florida. And then Tulane at number 21, 59-24 victory over SMU, easily covered the 3.5. But standings-wise, in the American, Tulane 6-1 after the win Thursday. UCF and Cincinnati both 5-1. Cincinnati will play Tulane next weekend. UCF has Navy, as we said, and next weekend UCF will visit South Florida. South Florida 1-10, so 2 wins for UCF, and they'll have the top spot in the American Conference. The second team will be determined probably between Cincinnati and Tulane. The winner of that game will have the tiebreaker edge and will have one more win than the other for the second spot. So a big matchup in the American Conference next week. But Tulane, with their win, UCF has Navy, Cincinnati at Temple. We already told you 17-point favorite at Temple tomorrow. All right, we move on to the Big 12. Told you about the Big 12 games that we've got. TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State and Oklahoma and Bedlam, K-State and West Virginia. The other games, Texas, still trying to play for that second spot in the Big 12. 9-point favorite at Kansas. Kansas bowl eligible now, 6 wins. Both teams 6-4. They haven't played each other, obviously. Winner has the leg up. As we look at the standings, TCU at 7-0, 2 games ahead of Kansas State. Kansas State at West Virginia, 7.5-point favorite. Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Texas, all 4-3. So Kansas State can maintain the victory over West Virginia this week, and then they go up next week against Kansas in the rivalry matchup, the Show Me State rivalry matchup between Kansas. Then they'll be the second team in the conference, assuming TCU wins out. They've got Iowa State next week. They've got Baylor this week. The number 4 Horned Frogs looking to stay undefeated, win the regular season title, and host Kansas State if Kansas State can win out. But still a lot to go in the Big 12. Texas, a 9-point favorite over Kansas State. Iowa State, 3.5 over a very good offensive Texas Tech team. They took TCU to the wire, 47.5. Iowa State challenged offensively, but they're at home. They're going to give the 3.5 to Texas Tech. Texas Tech's defense has been a lot like Swiss cheese, and it's been interesting to see how they've maintained some of their wins. Here, Texas Tech at 5-5, Iowa State at 4-6 is the wrong team favorite here. We'll see tomorrow when they play it out. Not really a lot to play out for in the Big 12. All right, moving on to the Big 10. Everybody knows about Ohio State and Michigan. A lot to talk about in the Western Conference. Wisconsin, Nebraska. Wisconsin, a 10-point favorite at Nebraska. They've had a horrible year as Nebraska. Wisconsin started off well, but they lost to Oregon State at home. They're at 5-5, and Nebraska 3-7. Wisconsin, a 10-point favorite. 40.5 the total. Not sure a lot of points will be scored there. Purdue, 18.5. We told you they got off to a good start. Northwestern does not have the offense to compete with that. 44.5, 18.5 favorite total. Got to think that Purdue is going to cover that. O'Connell's had a good year at quarterback. Charlie Jones, the wide receiver, has been outstanding. Michigan State, they had high hopes for themselves. They're hosting Indiana, 47.5 the total, a 10-point favorite. Indiana started off well. They beat Illinois at the beginning of the year, the first game of the year. They beat Illinois at home, but have not done much since then. 3-7 to 5-5 for Michigan State. And then Minnesota, 2.5-point favorite versus Iowa. Iowa's defense has been very solid this whole year, but 32.5 the total, offensively very challenged. They just have not had the same offensive output they've had the last few years. Minnesota can run the ball, 7-3 versus 6-4. So here's how it looks standing wise. Michigan and Ohio State, you know about them. They're going to play next week. They're going to determine the eastern half of the Big Ten Conference. The west side, Purdue 4-3, Illinois 4-3, Iowa 4-3, Minnesota 4-3. If Wisconsin wins, they'll get to 4-4. But all these teams at 4-3. Purdue has Northwestern, Illinois has Iowa, so that's going to knock somebody out. And then, or Iowa has Minnesota. Illinois has, where's Illinois? Illinois has Michigan, so that's going to be a tough challenge for them as well, too. So it's going to be interesting to see how the West shakes out. But whoever ends up winning that side of the bracket in the West Division is going to have to play Michigan or Ohio State in the Big Ten Conference Championship. And looking at these teams and their offensively challenged teams, except for Purdue, good luck to anybody that plays Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten Conference. All right, let's move on to the Mountain West here real quick. San Diego State with that victory, 34-10, a 14.5-point favorite over the New Mexico Lobos. The standings in that division, we got a couple things going on here. First of all, New Mexico, Boise State, a 14-point favorite at Wyoming. Air Force 22 versus Colorado State. Utah State against my Spartans, a 1-point favorite, 51 the total. Fresno State, 22.5 at Reno. And then late night, all of you know about those late night Hawaii games, 11-point favorite at Hawaii for UNLV, 55.5. Okay, standings wise, here we go. The Boise State-Wyoming game, a huge game in the Mountain Division of the Mountain West. Boise at 6-0, Wyoming at 5-1. They have the game at home. They are a 14-point underdog. The total, as we said, 44.5. Probably a lot of snow up there in Wyoming. If they can cover the 14 and win the game outright, the head-to-head will give them the Mountain title. They'll be in the Mountain West Championship game, probably against Fresno State. Fresno State, 5-1. San Diego State, with their win tonight, 5-2. Fresno State has the tiebreaker over San Diego State. And then San Jose State with Utah State. They've lost to Fresno State. They've lost to San Diego State. They're not in competition for the Mountain West Western Division of the conference. And so it's going to be either Fresno State, San Diego State playing the winner of Boise State, Wyoming in the Mountain West Championship game in 2 weeks. But what a weekend it's going to be. All right, the Pac-12, 4 teams. We said Pac-12 in the top 25. We went through most of the ramifications. Cal, Stanford, I live out in the Bay Area. It's a big game here. The battle for the axe. Cal gets the game at home. A 5-point favorite, 46 the total. Washington State got off to such a good start. 4-point favorite at Arizona State, 63 the total. We know that actually that's not right. Let me make sure I got this right here. Oregon State is at Arizona State. This right here is a producer's mistake. And when I say producer's mistake, I mean my mistake. This is the University of Arizona. And there we go. Washington State, a 4-point favorite at Arizona. Arizona coming off a big upset at UCLA. 63 the total. They can put up points. Washington State has had some trouble putting up points, but they've got a pretty good defense. To lay 4 points on the road, it seems like an appropriate line for me. Standings-wise, as we talk about the 2 games that are not relevant in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams that are in the top 25 in the Pac-12. Standings-wise, USC 7-1, Oregon 6-1, Utah 6-1, UCLA 5-2, and Washington 5-2. Washington has the tiebreaker over Arizona. They lost to UCLA. Utah and Oregon will play each other tomorrow. The winner of that game in Utah, by the way, in Oregon, by the way, in Eugene, Utah 2.5-point favorite. The winner of that game has a leg up on second place if USC can win tomorrow at UCLA. If they lose, then we've got a whole ball game going on here. USC would drop to second, and the winner of Oregon, Utah would take over first place. So a lot of machinations still left to go. Of course, we got the following weekend to take care of some of these games as well, too. Washington 5-2, UCLA 5-2. Don't you think the Bruins want to upset their crosstown rivals in USC with a win? 2-point underdog. They've got a good chance to do that. USC, again, with the loss, the winner of Oregon, Utah, takes over the regular season lead in the Pac-12 conference. And finally, in the SEC, Florida, 14-point favorite at Vanderbilt. Florida started off good. They turned out to be not so good as the year went on. Vanderbilt barely got a win. They actually did get a win. They got a win last week. One conference win this year against Florida, 3-4 in that Eastern Division. They're well back of Georgia and Tennessee in that SEC East Division. LSU and Georgia have already clinched for the SEC championship, but still standings go on in that place. Auburn, 5.5. They get Western Kentucky. That's not an easy game for them. Usually they get a cupcake when they're better before the Iron Bowl against Alabama. 52.5, 5.5 the point spread for Auburn. Missouri, a 29-point favorite over New Mexico State, 46.5. Missouri ends up there, has their conference at 2-5, and New Mexico State out of the Mountain West, 46.5 the total there. Standings wise, we already told you. Georgia's clinched the East. LSU has clinched the West. Georgia, by virtue of beating Tennessee, has that wrapped up. LSU, by virtue of beating Alabama, has that wrapped up as well too. Assuming they win, they've already clinched because this is a non-conference game that they've got tomorrow. All right, little shout out to the Independents. I want to give a shout out to Connecticut. Old colleague Jim Mora Jr. coaching at UConn. How about them? They're bowl eligible. They have 6 wins. They're a 10-point underdog to Army. I would think UConn could cover that 10 points. Army with the triple option runs at 43.5, the total there in the Independents. So just want to give a shout out to Jim Mora. All right, let me give you the best bets. We know you're waiting for the best bet segment for tomorrow, for this Saturday as we get to you. Best bet segment for Saturday in college football. I am going with TCU -2. You can see it at 2.5 somewhere. TCU -2 at Baylor. I think the Horned Frogs get it done. Defensively, they're going to have to hold off a couple of possessions against Baylor. Baylor's offense pretty good at home, but I think TCU gets the win. -2 on the road at Baylor. They'll maintain the number 4 spot in the Big 12, and they'll clinch the top spot, and they'll be waiting to see who finishes second in the Big 12 championship game in 2 weeks. Notre Dame, we talked about them against Boston College. I know Boston College got the upset win at North Carolina State, 21-20 last week. This Notre Dame team, they're trending upward. They're running the ball well. 20.5 points, 3 touchdowns. I can see that happening by halftime. 20.5 against Boston College. Lay it with Notre Dame. Texas Tech, we talked about this in the Big 12. +3.5 against Iowa State. Iowa State offensively challenged this year, and I mean offensively challenged. Had them a couple of games early in the year. Thought they'd be better offensively, but Texas Tech +3.5. They're going to get it done. They'll probably win the game outright. Talked about USC and UCLA. USC needs this game to stay up the top spot, but I like Dorian Thompson-Robinson. DTR has been outstanding for UCLA. Defense struggled against Arizona, but both defenses have struggled this year. UCLA at home, that crowd will be ready for USC, and I think that the pass rush has been really good. They'll go after Caleb Williams. DTR can run the ball around. They've got Carbonneau from Michigan, the transfer. He's been running the ball wild. USC hasn't stopped the run at all. UCLA +2 against USC tomorrow night. Finally, another Pac-12 game. Oregon at home. Bo Nix has been great. The aberration of Washington last week. If they can stop Utah on the run, they'll be able to move the ball. Bo Nix has done outstanding work. He's got great running game. He's got wide receivers. He's got a good tight end, and he can run the ball as efficiently as anybody in the country for a quarterback. I like Oregon at home +2.5, and if USC ends up losing, Oregon can go back into that number 1 spot. It's not going to help them in the BCS standings because they have 2 losses, but they will move up there. They will move up there right up with USC if UCLA can beat them, and they will have the advantage in the Pac-12 championship game. All right, so there you go. TCU, Notre Dame, Texas Tech, UCLA, and Oregon. Whole lot of machinations in the BCS rankings in terms of conference standings. I'm Vasi Vadaparty. We're sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. Check out all the college football, NBA, NHL, all your college sports, and all your game action, live music, DJs, happy hour specials every day. Don't forget, we're there for the NFL Sunday Ticket. Mention you heard the podcast on Sundays during NFL Sunday Ticket, and you'll receive 10% off your entire bill. Thank you to everybody on Facebook. Thank you to everybody on YouTube, and thank you to everybody on Twitter for mentioning us, for sharing us, and for liking us, and for sharing us all over. The views have been great. The comments have been great. We really appreciate it. College football Saturday will start in about an hour from now at noon Eastern, actually 11 o'clock for UCF and Navy right about now. And then an hour, the rest of the games will kick off all through the day. Enjoy the games. Enjoy Saturday football. We'll talk to you on Monday. We'll talk to you on Sunday for the live broadcast. And then Monday, we'll have a live show, preview Monday Night Football, and we'll get back to the NBA, NHL, and college basketball sports. This is feast week in college basketball. The V Party Sports Podcast, sponsored by the Brit Sports Pub and Patio. I'm Vasi Vadaparty. Have a great Saturday. We will see you tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific, live from the Brit Sports Pub and Patio in downtown San Jose. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.